Hello, we are here at the eve of Labour Party conference to put one issue and one issue alone on the map, and that is a great initiative called Housing First, which we think can revolutionise the way homeless people are looked at, treated and find their full potential. I am joined by the two past masters in this subject who've been leading the chase on this for a while, and we're going to discuss it a bit more. I have Josh Nicholson here, who's wearing an incredible suit for the occasion, who wrote this game-changing report, No Place Like Home, and also Matthew Torbett, a leading light of the Labour movement and a driver of change in all things good. It's great to have you also as a senior fellow of the CSJ. We're going to get into the report first, and then we're going to hear from two major champions of it, the two mayors of Manchester and Liverpool, Andy Burnham and Steve Rotheram. We'll also be hearing from the man that made this all possible, Steve Morgan, the Steve Morgan Foundation, which funded this work and has been helping drive it ever since. And we've also got some people from East London, Liverpool Street, who are going to give us their opinions on Housing First. But let's first go to you, Josh. Tell us about this report. What's the key recommendation? Why the hell did you do it?
So, yeah, this report comes in the context of a massive increase in rough sleeping really since the pandemic. So it's doubled basically since 2021, since the success of the Everyone In initiative. So we wanted to take a fresh look at this problem because it is increasingly visible on our streets and an increasing priority for government. However, we want to see Housing First prioritised as part of that. Housing First is the most proven intervention to tackling rough sleeping. So we have proposed basically a rollout of what has been incredibly successful in Manchester and Liverpool. We wanted to take the success of Housing First, which they've piloted there, to scale that up across the rest of the country so other people can share in that success.
And tell us just very quickly what the headline numbers of it.
So we proposed 5,500 places by the end of the Parliament. It would cost 103 million to do that. And we've proposed funding that by scrapping the programme that relocates civil servants, their expenses to go out into the regions. We feel like that is an appropriate programme to cut and to fund this instead, as well as using just a fraction of the current funding actually for rough sleeping. So they're the big numbers.
Matt, what have you lent your considerable force and voice to this campaign?
It's personal to me. I slept on the streets of Manchester as a teenager. I didn't get on with my parents growing up. I was the eldest of four, and I think the eldest always gets it that little bit hardest. They're sort of the trial child, and the other siblings sort of get it a little bit easy because you've just seen them tried what works. And we just didn't get on. It was a little bit of a dysfunctional background, and I've got skin in the game because of that. I was groomed into a gang whilst on the streets, sentenced to 12 months in prison, escaped with a suspended sentence and did community service. And if it wasn't for the opportunity and the shelter that I got from my best friend's mum and dad, I'd have probably gone out and reoffended. You have these invisible barriers in the way when you try and move on with your life. And that's why, you see with a lot of rough sleepers, a lot of complex needs going on. No one... there's sometimes an assumption that you must have done something to belong there, and it's very rarely the case. So I think the model of Housing First and the idea of having the safety and the opportunity to move on and move forward with your life is the things that we don't currently do at the moment, and that's what's key. I think if you've got all sorts of complex needs, you might be a veteran coming out of the army with PTSD, some serious mental health issues. You might have a drug issue or a substance abuse or drink or whatever else. If the stipulation is you've got to give up that sort of stuff before you can get into the accommodation, as someone that's an alcoholic, that's hard enough to do in normal life, and give up that sort of stuff and move forward again and try and access that support. It's even harder if you're on the street. I'd say it's almost borderline impossible for lots of people. So I think what Housing First does is it flips that traditional model on its head and allows you to move forward. And I think that's I would be selfish and wrong if what I benefited from, I don't try and give back to other people and try and move things forward.
Okay, before going to the two people or the two mayors that rolled it out, let's just hear finally a bit about the pudding. I'm not calling you the pudding. What are the actual success rates or results from this provision?
Yeah, so we know from the national pilots in Liverpool, Manchester and the West Midlands, 84% of people to stay in long-term housing 3 years after being on Housing First. And that is monumentally successful when you compare it to conventional options. And in Liverpool, it's found to be 3.5 times more effective than conventional options. And you guys were mentioning it just doesn't work for some people. It doesn't work if you've got complex issues and you're coming out of homelessness to try and deal with those before you might have the chance to access a permanent home. So this really, by reversing it, it's really transforming outcomes for people who've been homeless.
Very good. Well, we've heard the kind of stats piece, we've heard the why and the kind of real life piece. Let's hear now from the two mayors that made it happen, the political case. Let's hear from Andy Burnham of why he did it.
The evidence is quite clear. Everyone can recover. Everyone can move forward.
Andy, great to see you. Thanks
You
for
too,
being
Andy.
here. We are here to discuss Housing First. You were one of the originals that piloted this programme across Manchester to great results, amazing results, actually. Take us back. Why did you decide to go for this?
It was at the spending review in 2017. I'd just become the mayor here, Steve in Liverpool, both of us having left Westminster. Andy Street was new in post in the West Midlands. And at that spending review, it was announced that Housing First would be run as a pilot in these 3 new combined authority areas. But it was a really far-sighted decision because all 3 of us immediately worked together on it. There was a sort of early agreement that we had to be really true to the ideals of Housing First, the security of a home without pressure or conditions, and then the support for people to navigate a very complex system. And all of us built it in that way. And I think the results came from there.
Each of you have run a slightly different model in your areas.
Yeah.
Would you say that's one of the strengths of it? You could actually design it according to what you felt was right for your place?
100%. I think it's a great example of how devolution can work in practice, where you've got a shared set of ideals in terms of what you're trying to do, but then you make it right for here and you root it in the place that we're in. Sometimes when Whitehall commissions these things, it kind of says it'll be done through this particular organisation and, it'll be very top down. Well, it doesn't work. I would say the classic example of that was NHS Test and Trace in the pandemic. It didn't make sense on the ground.
Why do you think it's worked so well here?
I think the success of Housing First in Greater Manchester is the way in which it turned assumptions on their head about how you support people and how you actually move people forward. Because the thinking in public services as we've known them is that they operate in silos and they all have their own bureaucracy and rules and the rest of it. Actually, that doesn't help people who've got multiple challenge crises going on to move forward. And Housing First succeeded because it, in effect, lifted people out of the tyranny of all of that bureaucracy and said, no, look, this is going to be about giving you a foundation to recover and then move forward. And it was almost because it kind of almost ripped up the rule book. That is why it succeeded. The most fundamental of all needs to people, say the hierarchy of needs, it's housing, isn't it? You can't have good health without a good home. Kids cannot have a good education without a secure home to go back to from school. So in life, it's the most fundamental thing. And yet in Britain, millions of people live without that. And actually, wherever people come from on the political spectrum, if you're coming at it from a social security point of view or a get more people into work and promote aspiration point of view, this is a policy where I think right can genuinely meet left, because, the evidence is quite clear. Everyone can recover. Everyone can move forward. In our case, almost 80% of people offered the opportunity of sustained their tenancy.
What would be your message to both central government as well as other mayors?
I would say to government that you've made a good start and the Deputy Prime Minister has secured money for housing, which gives us a real chance in the next 10 years, particularly council, social, truly affordable housing. But really come at it now with a kind of coordinated approach, particularly with an eye to your ambitions around getting more people into work. Start with the kind of the philosophy that all people can recover and that you're kind of going to really help people to move forward. I think the government will achieve its big ambition around reducing the benefits bill and helping more people into work. I was really struck by Singapore. So the founder of Singapore, I didn't know this until I went, had a policy which he called Iron Rice Bowl. But the idea is, to be successful, we're going to have to kind of help people with the basics, but then having done that, they will have to then pick up the baton and succeed for themselves. And that, in a modern context, has turned into a housing policy for young people. So young people in Singapore are given subsidised housing in their 20s. I think we've got to a point in Britain where we're almost doing the reverse with young people here. We're almost loading them up with challenges before they've even got going. And I think just thinking through that Singapore example, as we build more truly affordable homes, I think there might be something in that.
Brilliant. Andy, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Andy.
Josh, you've just heard from the Mayor. What are your reflections?
Yeah, I think what Andy's saying about devolution being proven through Housing First is really important. So devolution works here. We want local flexibility to design these services. We've made that very clear in the report, and we're trying to tread a line here, right? We're trying to say that this works. Housing First is good and it should be rolled out nationally, but we want to make sure local areas can design services that kind of fit their specific needs and the issues that are coming up there. So we've kind of built that very much into the design of the policy. We want it funded by central government, but with total freedom for combined authorities to set up their own services, modelled on what's worked, so reflecting the local needs.
Okay, and so of the three that were piloted, did they all look very different?
Yeah, they all look very different. So in Manchester, you had it kind of commissioned out through different partners. In Liverpool, as we'll hear in a minute from Steve Rotheram, it was kind of delivered in-house. West Midlands, it was done at a local authority level. And there's no kind of right answer here. Housing First is good, it works, the principles work, but letting local areas kind of design the services that reflect the need locally is really important.
Matt, what are your reflections on what you said?
I think having the same concept is the right thing, and having those principles of Housing First is right. But it's not, naive to think that each area will have their own separate issues with regards to what people might need help with. I know when I was a rough sleeper, Manchester at that point was the spice capital of the UK and therefore had issues with synthetic drugs and how you may go about that for people that are rough sleeping. If you were somewhere North Yorkshire like Catterick or somewhere like Plymouth and you're leaving a barracks and you've had issues and therefore there might be a PTSD, there might be drink, there might be other stuff. So it's knowing what type of services that will benefit people around those same principles of Housing First that I think are important. And I think actually he's right can meet left. I've long, even if you compare this to sort of thing Mrs Thatcher did with Right to Buy, she basically banked a load of voters by ensuring people could get on the housing ladder. You could bank votes through this by ensuring people have a home and have an opportunity to move on with. And you might have those on the political left or the liberal types who go, we want to help people from a moral point of view, we want to help the homeless. You've even got those maybe stereotypically on the right who go, well, I just don't like to see it. Well, therefore, you're helping everybody in society because you're hoping that the issue will disappear. People are in accommodation and whatever else. So I think it's a vote winner for me. It is a vote winner and actually something that you could maybe bank some long-term success on.
It's such an interesting point, and it was clear that, this came from Conservative government, but Andy Burnham totally backed it, as did Steve Rotheram when we hear from him, and also Andy Street rolled it out as a Conservative mayor. But I've mentioned three names there that are all pretty big political forces, or at least business forces. Andy Street now lost his kind of mayoralty. Do you think, as much as the biggest strength is that this is kind of given its own personality by the mayors, it could become a bit of a weakness because not everywhere is going to have a mayor as strong as those guys?
That's true, and I suppose that's where maybe in the spirit of devolution, the mayors come together and actually you show as a group of politicians that help lift one another up, because regardless of party politics, right, I'm sure all of us around this table and everybody outside wants this country to succeed. What people don't want to see, regardless of politics, is to see homelessness increasing month on month, which we are seeing through be that rough sleeping, be that temporary accommodation or otherwise. Therefore, if there is an opportunity to change this, also is fiscally responsible, the fact that for every pound you put into this, you make two back, you actually have to beg the question of, regardless of your popularity as a mayor, Why would you not do it, either as a government or as a devolved authority?
Such a good point, Josh. The also, it seems to me that it lends itself a bit, not just. I mean, I know you're asking for central government investment that essentially goes out to the regions. It lends itself to a half decent model for local philanthropy as well, particularly via devolution. You say a bit more about that and the potential locally as well as what we're offering.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen partnerships in Liverpool between Steve Morgan Foundation, who have partnered with us in this already, kind of working together to run out particular policy initiatives. And this can be done for Housing First. I mean, there's huge support, as Matt was saying, for getting this problem tackling this problem. People of all political persuasions want to see homelessness tackled. So when we talk about philanthropists and government working together, it's a really important type of model that we should be definitely exploring more. And we've modelled actually what this would look like in each different mayoral combined area. And as these sort of get rolled out more and others get more established, these are exactly the partnerships that they should be looking to be doing. Because as Matt was saying, why would you not do this? It's a huge vote winner. It saves money in the long term. It improves services. And it ends homelessness.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's, it's really interesting, the political case, and you think in a time where everyone seems to be getting further and further apart, here's something at least some people can unite on from right and left and do some good. I think that sounds excellent. And bringing philanthropy into the picture as well, so it's not always a burden on the government coffers. It seems a kind of no-brainer in lots of ways. But let's hear from the other mayor, Steve Rotheram, who rolled this out as well.
I'd spoken to somebody many years ago when I was an MP who said, in this country, housing should be a human right. And that stuck with me. And I thought, this is the way that we could do things different. And so we started to look at the potential for a housing first approach.
How this model's worked, in a way you could put your own stamp on it and decide the delivery that was different to, say, what Andy Burnham in Manchester did or Andy Street down in the Midlands did. Can you just talk about why you think that's quite important, particularly not just for this, but future policy making? It feels like it's got something that we can really learn from in that way.
Well, I think you can't you? And there's a core that you'll find if you did a Venn diagram with the three of us. There's a bit there where we all overlap. So we're all having to do that bit. But the approaches are very different. So ours was, for instance, we wanted it to be in-house because we want to be able to control it, whereas other people commissioned it out. We give them the independence, but the support behind the scenes that they need. So we want them to start to recover from some of the things that they've been through. So there's some harrowing stories about how the individual ended up in those circumstances. So it's helping them alongside, giving them this home, not a house, a home to live in. And then we help them with picking their furniture, and we help them with, a new television and all that. And for some people, it's the first time for many, many years and sometimes decades that they've owned stuff, it's theirs. So we want them to feel that they are valuable human beings again.
You're bucking the trend of what's going on in the nation. 2% reduction in rough sleeping and everywhere else is growing. Of course, it feels like Housing First played a part, but there will have been other things.
Yes.
Care to kind of shed a light on why you think you're changing things when others are struggling?
The approach that Housing First provided to us meant that the local authorities carried on doing the great stuff they were doing, and then we could do this on top of it. And that's why I think we've collectively seen that there's been a reduction. And some people who might not fully understand the circumstances might go, well, 2%. That's against the backdrop of increasing numbers. So we're suppressing the actual amount whilst we're increasing the number of people that we're supporting.
Feels like what you've pioneered, that we're really onto something. And what we're trying to do is say to other mayors and to national government, this is an efficient, life-changing way to do it. How do you think, and do you think this could be rolled out across this country?
Well, it's a good use of public resources, and as we all know, they are finite. And so we need to prove to Treasury, to, if you like, the bean counters, who only look at spreadsheets, that this is a way that we can save the public purse money, but also we take the pressures away from those frontline services.
What would your message be to, Angela Rayner, to the Prime Minister about this as a scheme?
We've got to build more housing. We've got to have more properties to actually accommodate the people that we're trying to help. And what I think we need to convince government of is that we are addressing it in the right way, not just about the £7 notes, but about the other things that we've mentioned, about the knock-on consequences. If we don't catch people early in that cycle, then it goes on and escalates, and it costs more and more to the country.
Steve, well, it's brilliant. Thank you for how you're leading that, both in this city and actually for the country. And we're here to try and support all of that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for all your work as well.
Matt, just going from your experience here, what we heard from Steve, the Mayor of Liverpool, was there seems to be something quite powerful about ownership and stability, given this policy area, giving this to someone, and almost that word agency that's often, this has actually happened. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it was wonderful actually to hear Steve talk about it being a home, not just a house. And I think especially in a market, even for people that own or rent, it is very fluid, especially in big cities like London or Manchester or wherever else. I can't place, enough importance on things like stability. I remember when I first got my first council flat, it was an incredibly emotional moment of like, things are solid now. My feet are on the ground. I'm not, you go from, people think moving house is hard enough. Try moving squat, or try, finding somewhere to sleep that night. Not speaking to people for a week, not knowing where to shower, not brushing your teeth for 2 weeks. It's to finally have that stability of a home, not a house, but a home, and knowing you're safe and the feeling of safety. You're not thinking about the loud men coming down Oxford Street and wondering, or Market Street, and wondering whether you're going to get a kick in the face or whether they're going to urinate on you, and knowing that you're going to bed in your own bed, safe, and having that stability that you'll wake up and be all right in the morning. That for me is one of the great important bits of the stability that Steve spoke about.
And just following up on that, it's incredibly powerful how you say it and how you term it in that way. Surely then in this time that we have where everyone's scrambling to try and find ideas to get people back to work, to get them less inactive and all that type of thing, surely it must feed into things like our big welfare bill and all the rest, because if people have a kind of freedom to go and do some work and all the rest, it surely should be a benefit to everyone.
I think so, and I think we have a bloating welfare bill. People know that. It's fairly obvious, and I think Steve said it, that if you don't catch this now, it's only going to get worse in the long run. And I think you've got to get people whilst you can. And actually, we need to look at more radical ideas. A lot of people think radical means left wing. It just means different. We've got to do things differently. And if we are going to continue as a society, as a country, to do these sticking plaster methods, whether it be extra money towards discretionary housing payment or extra money for housing benefit, but you're not really moving people on or forward in life in a very caring, holistic way, in the way that Andy Burnham has done and Steve Rotheram, then you're just going to spend more money in the short term whilst the issue gets worse. It's going to cost you even more at a time where actually public resources are quite sparse. Steve said himself, this is exactly the sort of thing that public resources should be going on, stuff that works and is proving to work.
Josh, final word from you on that and on, as Steve termed them, the bean counters at the Treasury. Why is this such a positive thing, not just emotionally, not just, I guess, heart, but also head?
Well, basically what Matt was powerfully saying, that's reflected in the data, in the stats, in the return on investment that this has as a policy. Because when you give someone that stability, when you give them this space to be able to deal with the kind of issues that have been in their life, to get out of the homelessness that has been affected them, funnily enough, that also saves the government money. There's less money being spent on criminal services or prisons. There's less money being spent on homelessness outreach because people are safe in a house. They're able to deal with those issues and they're engaging with other treatments and supports. And we know it's got a 2-to-1 return on investment. It immediately pays back the initial investment after 12 months. That's what the pilot's evaluation is saying. So, that's much more that can be said for the current approach, which actually isn't helping people.
We didn't want to just hear from the politicians or the policymakers. We want to hear from the real people out on the street. So the boys took the cameras round and the microphones to hear what the people thought of Housing First.
What do you think about the current state of rough sleeping in London?
It's terrible. It's pretty bad.
I mean, it's definitely gotten worse over the last, since COVID for sure.
You walk down Liverpool Street,
You can see for yourself how it is, you know.
Most of the corners that I walk on in the main streets of London tend to have loads of homeless people, and even just down the street down here, there's quite a few that we see on a daily basis.
I've lived in London for 5 years, and every year homelessness has gone up, at least around this area.
You see a lot of people on the street, they're homeless. It's a bit sad.
Generally, yeah, it's getting worse and worse.
Okay, well, hopefully I've got some good news. I want to tell you about a report the Centre for Social Justice have written called No Place Like Home. I think it's hard enough to give up an addiction or get the mental health support, even harder if you're already on the street. What Housing First does is it flips the model on its head and goes, no, the most important thing is the accommodation. Yeah. We'll give you the accommodation and then give you the wraparound care as well so that you can move on in your life. If you put in £150 million that the government has got, we know they've got, it was in the last budget, they're totally able to do it, you get £300 million back and you could double the amount of Housing First places across the country. Does that sound like a good idea?
It does, yeah.
Sounds perfect, but I think the challenge comes to practice. But if you're saying you've already run pilots and they're working, then I mean, it's easy to scale that from there.
It's definitely something that London will benefit from, and it's very important for the homeless people. I would say focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely worth implementing. If we've tried the other methods and they haven't worked so far, then yeah, we should be trying something like this.
Listen to the public.
Do it, as you said.
It's a good idea. I think he should do it.
It makes sense. Just do it.
Well, there we have it. Steve Reed, it's down to you now. The people of Shoreditch and Liverpool Street have spoken. They won't be the last. Housing First, make it happen.
There you have it. Public have spoken. Who better to also hear from than one of the biggest house builders in the country. In fact, he has housed as many people that live in Nottingham through his work at Red Row Homes. Steve backed this project and is pushing it forward, and it's great to hear what he has to say on it. Steve, it's so good to be with you here today. We're here to discuss the No Place Like Home report that the Steve Morgan Foundation enabled to happen. All about homelessness in the UK and all about rolling out an answer to it in Housing First. You house more people than the city of Nottingham. What does a stable home mean for you?
It is somewhere at the end of the day you go back to and feel safe and be able to sleep. And whatever type of job you do, it all comes back to having somewhere you can go home to at night and regard as your own. The reality is that the people who are homeless are missing that part of the structure in their life, and it's fundamental to getting them back in, those people back into society, to have that roof over their head. Given my background in housing, I believe and I have believed all my life that housing is one of the most fundamental things in life. It's the backbone of everything. Family structure, employment, it's the backbone of society.
Government last year spent £1.4 billion on homelessness, yet the numbers keep rising. Knowing the kind of housing market like you do better than anyone in this country, what do you think has kind of gone wrong there, and why do you think it's in such a state?
Well, we've got to start from the fact that there are not enough homes in the country. Successive governments have not built enough homes. Planning policies got to the point where it's just not fit for purpose. The current government is at least trying to do something about it. It's not happening fast enough, but at least they're trying to do something about it. And until we get to the point where we're building enough homes in this country, housing is going to be a problem.
There's major debate going on at the moment about immigration. What's quite interesting about this report was that it feels like it gives government an option to do something for British people, for veterans, by focusing on rolling that out. Would you care to make any comment on why you're kind of passionate about that happening?
Let me make it clear. Our foundation's support for this is to get British homeless people into homes. It's not our priority to get illegal immigrants into homes.
And that comes across very clearly in the report, actually, that in places like Liverpool, we're asking for 241 places. In Greater Manchester, 378. This is focused on local people, and it gives government an answer to some of the pressure they're coming under. Steve, thank you so much for your comments. Thank you also for your incredible backing and creation of this report. We're not going anywhere on it. We're going to keep driving it forward and trying to change the lives of those.
Good. I really hope it makes a difference.
Thank you. Josh, obviously one of the major debates rolling at the moment is about that of immigration and the housing crisis and how this all feeds together. Can you just say a few words about how this idea ventures into that space.
Yeah, so we've seen a massive increase in the number of people sleeping rough who aren't from the UK. And we make it very clear in the report that we need to be supporting, anyone who's sleeping rough. There's no difference if you're sort of British or from another country in terms of the wider support that should be available. However, for Housing First, we're looking at quite local schemes, and we think this should be particularly targeted at people who have been long-term homeless, people who have been in and around the system for a long time in particular regions of the country, and not targeted at people who perhaps come here very recently and have found themselves sleeping rough. Of course, those people need support, but Housing First, as we've designed it here, we think should be prioritised for those long-term homeless populations who in the UK.
Matt, that was one of the things that actually surprised me on this, how low the numbers were in some ways. I think 200 odd in Liverpool, 300 in Manchester. And, from your own experience as well, sleeping rough, how do you think this can tackle some of those long-term sleepers in the way and get involved in the immigration debate or stay away from it in some ways?
So I think to make this politically palatable, Josh is right, you've got to want to help everybody for a start. That goes without saying. But people are under the guise, there's a perception of unfairness and that people are sort of skipping the queue ahead of them. And I think, therefore, if you're potentially born in this country, you may have contributed financially or otherwise more than somebody else who isn't from this country, and therefore should you be seen as that priority. I think in an ideal world, you'd want to build 50,000 houses and make sure everybody's covered in this. We don't live in an ideal world. And actually, Steve's point was interesting because we haven't built enough houses. I think if we'd have had net zero migration since 2010, we would still need 2.7 million houses in the country today. And that is poor policy and not enough house building for the last 50 years, essentially. So it's successive governments. There's no doubt about that. I think Steve's right. But the numbers are low. And I think you can't help but fall into the sort of immigration argument purely because I think at the moment there seems to be a very, very much a failure of the asylum system that then leaves these people destitute. That's another failure that probably somebody else needs to look at some point. But ultimately, yes, all homeless people need help. All rough sleepers are entitled and should get help. But I think for this, running it on a more local scale and a devolved scale is probably the right approach. Final question then. Why is this the right policy for now?
So we have a homelessness strategy that's waiting on the desks of the Ministry for Housing. We've been waiting for a new minister. We've got a new Secretary of State now. So we think this is the perfect moment to really go for this, to put housing first at the centre of this homelessness strategy as a cornerstone, really, showing that the government can make a difference. It can change people's outcomes. It can change this very visible problem of homelessness by rolling out 5,500 places, what we've recommended, which would take the most entrenched rough sleepers off the streets by the end of the Parliament.
Matt, final word to you. Why is this the time?
Because every single month we see statistics that say we're going backwards and more people are homeless and more people are rough sleeping. Now is the moment. There is no time to essentially wait, because otherwise I think the rot is going to set in for those that go from rough sleepers to long-term rough sleepers, and it becomes harder still to almost bring those people back from the edge. We have to think about the value that we want to place on human life and potential, and the potential that is wasted by somebody not having that helping hand, and not a hand out but a hand up, and the opportunity to make something of their lives just because something has happened to them and they've ended up in that situation. If we don't act now, there are going to be more lives lost this winter, and nobody wants that.
Matt, Josh, thank you for your compelling drive of this work. Let's hope we get it over the line.